Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, we've got cholera in the news, sanctions, more sanctions, of course, and a new ICBM launched from North Korea. This, of course, is just a part of the reports that we have for today's broadcast, but we're going to start off with the country of Yemen. Well, in addition to its current state of war and famine, it is battling a cholera outbreak. Well, Mustafa, a mother of a sick child, said her son is suffering from both anemia and cholera at the same time. He's been suffering from vomiting and diarrhea for hours. Well, less than half the country's hospitals remain open, but those that are open are forced to use tents to make room for the high numbers of people who need medical attention.
Ms. Mustafa also said of the hospital condition, hospital rooms are packed with patients and it's obvious that people are staying in the corridors. There's even 2 sick children on the same mattress. Now there's a lack of facilities, the rooms are packed, and the medicine is very expensive here in Qatar. The aid agencies warn that this outbreak is the largest ever recorded in a single country in a single year, with estimates as many as 5,000 Yemenis becoming ill every day.
Very, very dire situation that they're in. Well, some European countries are no longer welcoming refugees, not even allowing even one asylum seeker to cross over their borders into their countries, of course, opposing the EU refugee program to help deal with the crisis, which some worry will just get worse as a result of European countries closing their doors in the face of those seeking help.
The European Court of Justice is hearing lawsuits filed by Hungary and Slovakia challenging the EU's mandatory quota to accept asylum seekers they don't want. Now, the numbers indicate the country's attitude towards the directive, with Slovakia only accepting 210, Hungary 430, and Czech Republic, who voted against, accepted 435. Less than 10,000 in the UK, where immigration is a major political issue. Now, Germany, on the other hand, has honored its commitment, accepting over 430,000.
Almost 500,000, amazing. Well, as far as the refugee camps are concerned for these people, the camps are described as terrible living conditions. People are living in rubble, asbestos-filled, old oil, or not oil, but old land-filled sites. People are without shoes, living in horrible conditions, and you have the situation there is you have people who had careers, they had families, they had lives, they had hopes, they had dreams, they were going to school, but now they're begging for food, they're begging for shelter, they're begging for shoes even. Mothers with newborns are having to try to survive in these conditions without proper sanitation and nutrition for both the mother and the child, which of course makes living difficult. Currently, no one has answers when asked as to whose responsibility it is to make sure that these refugees know their rights.
Well, transgender people serving in the military is a big no-no, according to one of the latest tweets from President Trump. But according to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that policy won't change, at least for now, until the president's direction has been given to the Secretary of Defense, and then the secretary issues his own guidance. So a little bit too soon, but he's saying a no-no.
Yeah. Tweets don't actually make laws.
That's
or make
right.
changes in the laws. Well, on a recent episode of the 700 Club, Mike Evans with the Friends of Zion organization spoke in an interview concerning the good and bad in Christianity. Evans said, "How do you confront evil? Well, by the inspiration you draw from your heroes and your history." He said that his organization is telling the story of quote-unquote real Christians, classifying Crusaders, the Inquisition, the Pilgrims, and even the Holocaust as fake Christians.
Well, Catan, in his interview, Evans also spoke about the purpose of his museum, which is to be a bright light. Now, he said, "My mother told me as a child, Christians kill Jews. Christians hate Jews. Jesus died, don't dig him up. My mother never saw a real Christian. She only saw anti-Semites, my father being one of them." Now, he told of his father strangling him and leaving him for dead because he thought his mother had an affair with a Jewish man.
Interesting. Well, regarding the issues over the Temple Mount, he said that that problem can't be solved in the natural because there's no forgiveness. Well, we have more sanctions, like we mentioned before, in the international community against, of course, Russia, North Korea, but this time Russia is in the crosshairs. And so, a lot is, up in the air with how Russia is going to respond to this. And we have our correspondent Larry McGee, who's going to report on this and a few other news stories. Larry, what's Russia's take on these latest sanctions from America and its allies?
Moscow is up in arms after a recent package of sanctions passed by both the House and the Senate. The new measures are said to have received overwhelming support by lawmakers to send a message to Russia for its alleged election tampering. The actions come at a time when Moscow was also on unfriendly terms with the U.S. due to its presence in Syria and the Ukraine. Even when the bill had yet to be passed by the Senate, Russia is said to have already been devising methods of retaliation. The deputy foreign minister for the Orthodox nation stated at the time that the U.S.'s move defied common sense, that it would only worsen relations, and that the two nations were steering into uncharted territory. Other thoughts emerging from Russian discussions on the matter were that Moscow will have no choice but to come up with a painful response to Washington's decision. The voice everyone was wanting to hear, however, was that of Russia's head, Vladimir Putin, who at the time had remained silent on the issue. Now that the measures have passed the Senate, however, backlash from Russia has come in kind. Moscow recently ordered the U.S. to cut the amount of diplomats it has in the country by September 1st. Commentators and analysts pinpoint the root of the latest escalation in December, when the U.S. expelled several Russian diplomats and confiscated several Russian mansions. Moscow is said to have been measuring its response since then, but has been moved to action by the U.S.'s latest provocations. Russia's moves are basically a tit for tat, calling for a reduction in diplomatic personnel to the same extent across all of Russia as is reflected here in the United States with regard to Russian diplomats. Moscow has also froze America's access to various warehouses with the warning that it will go further than it has in response to what it is calling Russophobia. In a statement released by the Russian Foreign Ministry, the department stated that these sanctions once again show how aggressive the U.S. is in conducting its foreign policy. Using exceptionalism as an excuse, the U.S., it stated, arrogantly ignores the interests of other countries. The measures are said to still require the signature of the incumbent president, but President Putin has now become vocal on the issue, calling the latest move, which penalizes American businesses that buy and sell with Russia, a violation of international law and the rules of the World Trade Organization. The Russian head says that the nation is being very patient and very reserved, but at some point it will have to respond. The leader says his nation cannot endlessly tolerate aggressive behavior towards their country. These actions, he said, can be perceived as aggravation, and he would even say exceptional cynicism. Many nations throughout the world are voicing their disagreement with the U.S.'s actions, including Germany, which is one of America's closest allies and one of the nations who would be most affected by America's recent decisions. Germany's foreign ministry spokesperson Martin Schäfer says that he has tried to describe that Germany can fundamentally not accept that the American government, American politics, and Congress, under the guise of sanctions, conduct industrial politics in favor of American energy supplies. This position, he says, has not changed, and they will keep saying that loud and clear to the U.S. One project of particular importance to many European nations is the Nord Stream 2 project, which is intended to be an offshore natural gas pipeline that will shuttle gas from Russia to Germany and would also provide benefits to Austria, the Netherlands, and France. The conditions of the new sanctions would impose fines on quite a few very prominent energy companies for buying and selling with Russia. The restrictions are being seen as suspect, though, due to recent statements made by Washington lawmakers calling for the U.S. to be the providers of natural gas to its European allies as opposed to Russia. The president, who ultimately has to sign off on the measure, is said to be in a tough spot, with America's partners in Europe feeling as if the U.S.'s latest moves pose a threat to the stability of its energy sector. The seriousness with which Europe sees the recent developments is thought to be best represented by a statement released by the head of the European Union, Jean-Claude Juncker, which stated that if Europe's concerns are not taken into account sufficiently, they stand ready to act appropriately within a matter of days. America first, he says, cannot mean that Europe's interests come last. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, the disunity coming from the United States government certainly isn't going to help in these troublous times.
Never has and never will.
Well, in other news this week, unarmed Palestinians were attacked by Israeli security forces upon finishing evening prayers outside Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, as a result, several people were injured, including 2 young girls. In the days prior, worshipers refused to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque area. Crowds gathered outside to protest the installation of metal detectors and other surveillance over Al-Aqsa.
Despite Jordanian custodians of the Temple Mount region meeting with Palestinian leaders, including President Mahmoud Abbas, no agreement was reached. President Abbas clearly expressed he would not accept any security measures at the holy site, saying if the situation does not go back to what it was on the 14th of July, then there will be no change in our position.
Well, Alon Leal, former director of the Israel Foreign Ministry, said this situation has tested Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's image, saying if you look at it from the Israeli angle, it's quite an embarrassment for him. The right wing is attacking him for being too soft on terror, and the general public sees this hesitation back and forth, and it definitely doesn't look good with this decision 10 days ago and then a U-turn now. And what he's referring to with the U-turn is that they did actually remove some of the metal detectors, but they said they're going to be putting other surveillance measures in place. So still not acceptable to the Palestinians who want to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque area for prayer.
Sure. Well, despite Israel's continued use of force against the Palestinians, prayer goers remain steadfast. Crowds gathered outside the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, refusing to go in, saying that no security measures are acceptable to them.
Well, North Korea continues to fuel the fire in their region as they tested an unidentified missile this week, just 20 minutes before midnight South Korean time. Now, the test launch prompted an urgent 1:30 a.m. National Security Council meeting called for by South Korean President Moon Jae-in.
The Japanese Chief Secretary Cabinetry reported that the missile flew for about 45 minutes before landing in the waters off of Japan. This missile launch was not entirely unexpected, as officials from the United States and South Korea said that intelligence gathering showed preparations were being made for another missile launch in North Korea.
What officials will now be focusing on is exactly what kind of missile this was. Now, the July 4th test was North Korea's first intercontinental ballistic missile launch. Now, that also was tracked landing in the waters off of Japan. And the experts, they tracked the altitude of the launch missiles to calculate what type of range these missiles are capable of, knowing that North Korea's goal is actually to reach the U.S. mainland with a nuclear-tipped warhead. So they judge by the altitude of the travel to see if it could, that's right, have the distance to reach the U.S.
Well, officials in Hawaii are launching something themselves, a campaign to help residents plan for a possible nuclear attack from North Korea. North Korea's successful test fire of an intercontinental ballistic missile puts the Aloha State within its reach.
Now, nuclear policy expert Jeffrey Lewis at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies says it's frightening, so we have to take it seriously. But we also need to be calm and we need to be measured. And we need to know that there are things that we can do. And what he's referring to there, Katan, is these, you remember the old videos that showed actually drills where it showed elementary children doing the duck and cover under the desk.
Right.
That's what he's saying should actually be pulled out and gone over again.
Interesting. Residents are being warned that if a missile is launched, prepare not to just for the initial strike, but also for the fallout, which could mean sheltering in place for up to 2 weeks. Well, as you can imagine, some are concerned that warning the public will scare off tourists. Mr. Lewis finished up by saying, a nuclear war is just such a horrible outcome that every moment you spend preparing for it is probably better spent trying to prevent it from ever happening.
Well, that's well put.
Yeah.
Well, the United States top Army general is telling reporters time is running out to stop North Korea's missile program, with military sources saying there is another ICBM test being planned by the North. General Mark Milley is warning something has to be done soon or the U.S. will have to take serious action.
The U.S. Army Chief of Staff gave a candid interview with the National Press Club this week explaining that right now North Korea is the biggest threat to America. Milley said war in the Korean Peninsula would be terrible. However, a nuclear weapon detonating in Los Angeles would be terrible.
Well, General Milley says North Korea has a wide variety of missiles, a sizable conventional force, as well as chemical and nuclear weapons. Now, he painted a grim picture if Kim Jong-un used his arsenal, saying a war in the Korean Peninsula would be highly deadly. It would be horrific. The United States military, in combination with South Korean military, would utterly destroy the North Korean military, but that would be done at a high cost. Of course, there's going to be a lot of lives lost if they did that.
Well, I was thinking a lot that high cost is casualties,
right?
You know, victims of war. Well, now the general says some tough choices have to be made before the North Korean government goes any further. Milley stated, "We're going to have to make conscious decisions that are going to have significant consequences." And I'll just stop there, but it's not going to be a pretty picture. I can tell you that. It will be very violent, he said. And Jeff, this will not only be violent, but deadly for everyone involved.
Right. War is never a pretty picture.
It never is.
Well, as we can see, the nuclear wars that Yisrael Hawkins has shown are prophesied for this generation are right around the corner. No place will be spared from the destruction of nuclear war without a higher power intervening. Now, you might not consider yourself religious, faith-based, or anything else you might call it, but when these wars kick off, you will be begging for someone to step in and stop it. Don't wait till that time and then wish you would have listened. The inspired scriptures have not only foretold of the destruction, but also a place of safety. If you'd like to find out where this prophesied protected place is, contact the House of Yahweh today and request to be added to their absolutely free monthly mailing list, where you will receive details and directions on what you can do for the saving of you and your family. Don't wait another day.
And contact the House of Yahweh today and, of course, request your free copies of the monthly newsletter and Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how. You can write the House of Yahweh by writing to the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498. Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can also visit them on any of their websites by going to www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, and www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to www.ypnnews.com. You can also email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen. And of course, don't forget the best study resource to the inspired Holy Scriptures on the internet today, the Yisrael Says and the Ask Yisrael program. You can find those websites by going to www.yisraelsays.com YisraelSays.com and www.askyisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is Yisrael Hawkins, and you're definitely going to want to hear his inspired message. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.